We have John Scheibe coming to the stage shortly. Woo, woo, yes, please, woo, woo, yeah. He's a photographer, filmmaker, artist. He graduated from NMU with a degree in theater in 2015. He's lived in New York City for the last 5 years and worked as an actor and singer. He just recently moved back to Marquette last year and is currently a full-time content creator for the Boreal Collective and Make It Marquette.
Awesome. Hi, welcome. Good morning, everybody. I'm John Scheibe, also known as Yonder John on Instagram and some other social media spaces. I'm an artist, and I've spent the last year for the first time in my life ever creating my art completely full-time. I'm here to talk with you all today about kind of how that happened, sort of at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, pre-vaccines. It was very unusual, but repeatable, and I'll explain why I think that's true. The pandemic has affected a great many things in day-to-day life. I don't even need to begin to list the things that have happened. We're all well aware. Most of it sucks, most of it. One thing that's changed, though, and is mostly responsible for how I've managed to become an artist full-time. I'm a massive advocate, and I think we've only seen a fraction of its potential in not just some creative industries, but everywhere, in almost every industry. It's already changing everything, and that's remote work. But we'll reel it back a little bit first. I'm a full-time artist, but what does that mean exactly? What kind of artist? That's a very good question. You've seen some of my photography up here already. I'm a nominee in the Fine Art Photography International Awards this year, but that's not all. I'm also a filmmaker, filmmaker, actor, writer, producer, content creator, and some other stuff. I'm an artist in the sense that I'm fearlessly exploring whatever veins of artistry that interest me. Anything I feel creatively passionate about, I explore. And while that may sound a bit unusual, it's becoming more and more common these days. It's really cool. But this kind of artistry is also becoming necessary. Being an artist in this day and age almost requires versatility between mediums. You can't just be a good musician anymore. I mean, there'll always be a place for elite talent within every creative industry, painters, film directors, and whatnot. But I'm seeing a change. In fact, I'm part of that change myself. Artists are cultivating full-time careers, myself included, without excessive industry-defining talent. There's a balancing of talent and skills within other areas. Great artists today are typically known for one singular thing. That's not always the case, but it's pretty standard. The artists of tomorrow, though, cast their talent like a wide net, pursuing something larger than just craft. Like any field, any industry, art is changing with the times. And not just the way we produce and create, but also consume. And a great place to look for this wild new change, this wild new age of artistry, is Twitch. For those who don't know, Twitch is an online streaming platform, much like Facebook Live or Instagram Live, except it doesn't really do other stuff. It kind of just does streaming. It's like Netflix, but everyone's live. It's a very concentrated platform. It's exploded in popularity over the last 5 to 10 years. The vast majority of its success has been in the video game industry. Creators and gamers will set up webcams, live stream their gameplay to their audience, and people absolutely eat that stuff up, myself included. It's amazing. During Twitch's first year in 2012, the platform polled roughly 100,000 viewers. Over this year alone, and the year's not even over yet, Twitch has already amassed a staggering 2.84 million concurrent viewers. It's unreal, but it's also very much real. The numbers are real, it's tangible. The modern age of communication and instant access and technology has turned everything on its head. Everyone watches the news, right? Well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people watch the news. Out of the top 3 major cable news networks in 2021, the top performer averages only 2.24 million during prime time. And that number is down almost 40% from last year. We're understanding this shift, right? But what am I doing? Am I trying to sell you Twitch stock or something? No. Why do we care about the video game industry? And why do we care about the streaming platform? Well, because Twitch is not just a place for video games. That's right. Artists also stream on Twitch. Musicians, DJs, programmers, woodworkers, painters. If you were here during the panel yesterday, you might remember that Silas, one of the speakers, founder of Ambitious Games, he live streams his creative process on Twitch as well. Almost every vein of artistry, almost every craft is streaming on Twitch all the time. Out of Twitch's 140 million active monthly users, roughly 3 million of them are following artist channels. Now that ratio is pretty wide. 3 doesn't sound very large when you're comparing it to 140, but the numbers, yes, the numbers, all those numbers I've been talking about for the last few minutes, they don't really matter. Yes, we can see the shift, but the numbers aren't relevant to what I'm talking about today. What matters is accessibility. When I was in high school, I studied music. I was in band, marching band, I played concerts and all that stuff, but that era of music for me was largely a substitution. What I really wanted to try and play around in and explore the world of was acting and filmmaking and theater. The theater department at my high school was lacking. So I was like, nope, not gonna do that. I cannot be seen doing that, but the band in my high school, it's weird. In my high school, the band was cool. Like, our director was awesome. There was over 100 band kids consistently every year, which is impressive for an Upper Michigan school. Yeah, band was cool. The band kids often were on par in popularity with the football players. The football players usually got all the funding, but that's a different lecture. My point is that I attached myself to a creative outlet because I needed creativity in my life. And while I still lean on those skills from that time even today, it wasn't my true passion then. I spent almost every day in band, having a complete blast, but always, in the back of my mind, I was wondering if I was wasting time because I wasn't brave enough to throw myself into the productions happening on the stage right next door. So when I graduated, I decided that I was gonna go for it. I picked a college away from my friends, attempting to eliminate, peer pressure or embarrassment. I went to Western Michigan University down in Kalamazoo, very far away from my family. I needed a fresh new set of people and friends and connections. Also, Western happened to have an amazing musical theater program. It routinely cranks out actors and actresses that go on to do amazing things. So I was like, yes, perfect combination. Let's go. I moved into my freshman dorm. My parents drove back up to the UP. I met my roommate. He's this super confident personality. I could tell there was solid potential we were gonna be friends. I asked him what his major was. Musical theater. Oh my God. This could not be more perfect, but here's the thing. He was a confident personality, and I was not. I was a shy kid, even in college. I had never stepped foot on a stage before, except for high school band performances. It was in a brand new place, brand new people. It was totally nerve-wracking, and in walks this semi-pro professional theater extraordinaire. He was very talented, but he was also intimidating. No fault of his, of course. Theater kids, as I learned later on, are just that way. They're already out there. They just kind of don't care. It's awesome, but not for me at the time. I didn't tell him my major. It was theater. I changed it. I was terrified. I switched to a double major in film, video, and media studies and Japanese. I learned a heck of a lot about Japanese religions and how television sets worked that year, but I was very depressed. It was one of the worst years of my life to date. I set up myself for success in a creative field, perfect scenarios all the way across the board, but it backfired bad. There was a stretch of about 3 to 4 months where I was back home in the UP like every single weekend. I would drive up Friday and drive back down on Sunday. I was miserable. I had no friends. I stayed in my room all year, watched my roommate go in and out of all of these incredible productions happening on campus. I went to one of his shows. He had a role in Hairspray, I believe it was that year. He invited me. It was amazing. And he was great in it. It was the nail in my coffin at Western. I couldn't take the disappointment that I was feeling in myself. I had a big old breakdown, finished the semester, moved back to the UP, enrolled here at NMU, changed my major back to theater. And the next 3 years were some of the best years of my life. But here's the thing. They wouldn't have been great if it weren't for my experience and my time at Western. My experiences that year fundamentally changed the way that I look at creative opportunity and challenges. I lacked creative confidence back then. I had never explored any field of art seriously before with intent to do it professionally. When I moved back up to the UP, having gone through all that, I gave myself one last shot. I said, if it doesn't work a third time, it's not meant to be. But I wanted it badly, despite my insecurities, so I gave it everything I had. I've been through the worst already, so what did I have to lose? My best friend from high school was at NMU at the time. I moved in with him. He asked me what I chose for my major. I said, theater. And we had a good laugh about it. He teased me every once in a while during our time there, but I didn't change it. I pretty much ignored my electives that first semester. I enrolled in pretty much every theater class that was available to me. I gave myself no option to chicken out. I auditioned for the winter show, Legally Blonde the musical, and I got in. I met my wife on that stage during that production. We've been married for 5 years. I learned one of the most valuable lessons in my career following my time at Northern. The art, the creativity is always worth it. And to chase it like your happiness depends on it, because in most cases it does. Going back to the Twitch stuff that I'm talking about, excuse me. Accessibility to creativity is key. In college, during my time at NMU, I was a fresh artist. I had never acted in anything before that production of Legally Blonde, like absolutely nothing. The barrier to entry for me, for someone who was just starting out, regardless of all of the classes I was taking, was frustrating. Acting in particular is a tricky field. If you want to go pro, what do? Is there a clear set of instructions? No. Is there a path that's easy to follow? Absolutely not. Your professors do their best to guide you, but at the end of the day, it is a field that is just littered with luck and coincidental networking. That's the case with most veins of artistry, of course, but acting in particular. On that topic, let's talk about Chris Pratt. Great actor, right? Most people know who he is. He's very successful. Did you know that he used to live in a van down to his last little bit of cash at the very beginning of his career, struggling to find work, but eventually, magically, you might say, right at the last minute, broke into the film industry with his acclaimed role as Andy in Parks and Rec. That was his first job. How many people here know this story? A few people, good, because it's regardless, of course, it's a familiar one. Because the industry is piled high with stories like this. But it's a lie. He may have been living in a van, I don't know. But Parks and Rec was not his first role. Mr. Pratt here has actually never told that story. It was something that the media spun up to kind of explain how he got famous. What a lot of actors or publications mean when they say it was their first job, it was their first role, is that it was their first professional contract in a leading or a supporting role on a union set. Chris Pratt worked, now this is the truth, from him in interviews, for many years as an actor before Parks and Rec. His first union role that you can find on IMDb is from 2000. Parks and Rec didn't air until 2009. There's even stuff from before 2000, his very first actual role, but nobody talks about that. And that's one of my big criticisms with acting and other creative fields. As a young high schooler, even in college, wishing and trying to be a better actor, how is this media-spun story helpful? This kind of story is everywhere in our industries, but it's rarely the truth. And I'm not trying to shovel hate, anywhere that it doesn't belong, but the point is, wouldn't high school John have benefited from knowing how Chris Pratt actually came to be interested in acting and what his very first roles were? Even if it was just a student film, a local production, a high school drama, wouldn't that have given 15-year-old John some sense of direction early on in his career? Yes, but stories like that don't get clicks. They don't make headlines. People like to consume glamour rather than realism, and it's devastating to creative fields. This glorification of the craft. Daisy Ridley played Rey in the sequel Star Wars trilogy. A lot of people know her. Famously, her first role. We all know the headlines associated with that. It's not true. Do you know how many steps it takes to even get into a union audition room with J.J. Abrams? It's not none. Lies. But that's okay. And here's why. Artistry is popular. Creativity, the art of discovery and process, thanks to platforms like Twitch and YouTube, are more accessible than ever before. If I was back in high school again today and I wanted to learn about dance, just as an example, 2 clicks and I'm watching a live stream of a dancer rehearsing for a show or doing a presentation. 3 clicks and a few sentences later on my keyboard, and I'm having a burning question about the field answered by somebody working in the industry. I don't need to be critical anymore because the way we consume content has changed. Audiences and students are asking the right questions. There's authenticity now more than ever, because if you're live and you flub a line or mess up a track, don't nail a recording, sing a little bit off tune, take a chunk out of a dresser you're trying to build by hand, we see that. And you might think that streamers will panic and, oops, didn't mean to do that, and shut off the stream, but that's not true. Most of them, the good ones, will educate their audiences on why that mistake happened and either start over or move on with their project. And here's the kicker. Twitch, YouTube Live, Instagram Live, they're free. Free to use, free to consume, free to learn. It's amazing. Clubhouse is another one. Anyone here heard of Clubhouse? A few people, good. It's an app, for those who don't know. It used to be invite only. Now it's open to everyone, free to use. Artists are all over that application, professionals. You log in, scroll through a list of audio-only chat rooms happening, you pick one and you're in. I joined a chat room a few weeks ago, chocked full of professional, industry-leading photographers, portrait photographers, landscape photographers, food photographers. There was one photographer in there, I think he said that he only took pictures of the dashboards of old cars for a living. It's incredible. Here's what the chat room was called. Calling all photographers, portfolio review. If you click past the chat room and see which group was hosting, there it is, the full-time hobby. No membership required, by the way, free to join. Right there in the description, it says, a space to learn, grow, and help other creatives excel in their industries. We're providing a safe environment to ask questions, network, and be genuine with other creatives, photographers, and artists. Towards the bottom there, we host daily conversations revolving around work, creativity, and business. Wow. Okay. Let's get back to the remote work topic here. Quite the adventure we're on today. Remote work is provenly effective in a staggering number of industries. Most corporate employers, you might assume correctly, fear the flexibility because they're worried about slack and laziness, and losing money. My wife works for a big corporation as an accountant. She started working from home last year, and her company, on pretty much all fronts, their numbers went up. Productivity is at an all-time high, despite the risk of laziness. When my wife and I used to live in New York, which I'll talk about in a little bit here, she worked for a different corporation, almost no personal time, 40-minute commute in and out of work every way, stressful environment, there were pointless meetings and constant day-to-day distractions and conflict in her office. Working from home, here in Marquette, it's the exact opposite. She's now able to pursue not one, but 3 different passions outside of work. She works all of her normal hours, overperforming and excelling in her career, I might add. Also a part-time professor, teaching, fully remote. Also an instructor for the band right here at NMU. Also currently ranked 11th in the state for powerlifting because she just can't help herself. And she's just finished her master's degree online, completely remote as well. The freedoms and accessibility that come with remote work are undeniable and awesome. Some industries are a little trickier to navigate, with remote work, that's true, but at the very least, it's a conversation that more and more employers are having. Do we need to be paying rent for several floors of this massive skyscraper in Midtown to house 3 of our company's teams, all of which are more productive and statistically happier at home? Maybe not. So that's remote work for a very specific kind of work. But how did remote work change my creative career? How is it that I've been able to craft a full-time job on the heels of the most dramatic shift to work from home over the last year? Everything changed after I made this video called Artist in Isolation. And I'll play this here for you in a minute, but it requires just a little bit of context, sorry. My wife and I, we lived in New York City for about 5 years. We moved out literally like days after graduation. It's a funny story, I'll save it for another time. I went to New York to become an actor. I had studied acting in college, I had a fresh degree in my pocket, it made perfect sense. I was even enrolled in a well-known acting school going into New York, to continue my momentum. The school shall remain nameless for legal reasons, but it turned out to be a huge scam, which surprised me because I found out about this school from posters that were hanging in the department here at Northern. They're not there anymore, don't worry. I managed to get most of my money back, but I learned a valuable lesson, not even 2 weeks into New York. And that lesson is this: I am the only person who deserves to be in charge of my creative career. I decide. And that's powerful. And I didn't realize that I had that until the moment I walked up to that front desk at that school and asked for my money back. So I took that money and I put myself through bartending school instead, because New York is expensive and you have to, need money to live there. I worked pretty much full-time as a bartender all 5 years, right up until the pandemic shut the city down. During those 5 years, though, I landed a role off Broadway. I was in 2 short films, 1 student film. I played a lead role in a feature film, and I was even on an episode of Manifest on NBC. I took singing lessons. I auditioned for open calls for Broadway shows. I took voiceover classes, all of this stuff, the beginnings of that acting career that high school me needed to see. Then came the pandemic, an abrupt end to my New York City career, you might think, but not really. Because careers don't happen overnight, especially in New York. Nobody moves there and has instant success. It's a lot of work, and even more waiting. So what did I do with my time? Between shifts, maybe my voice lesson was canceled that week, there were no auditions on the calendar. I started developing an interest in photography and in making videos and creating content. I started wandering around New York during my free time, taking pictures with my camera and making videos about the things that I found interesting. I realized something. Artistry is pliable. It can be whatever the heck you want it to be. I started to experiment in all of these different things because there was some familiar feeling in the back of my head that I might regret not giving these things a shot. Collaboration is an important aspect of art. A lot of success in creative industries comes from mass collaborations, right? But we shouldn't ignore how important it is to be able to collaborate with yourself. I didn't realize it at the time, but all those different interests and things that I was doing, not only was I finding inspiration within my own work, but I was building a much larger career than just acting. I did a performance a few years ago, a showcase. It was put together by my vocal coach at the time. I sang in this cute little theater right off of Broadway, and afterwards, I made a video talking about that experience. And after that, I thought maybe it was time to make a video talking about my decision to drop out of acting school. I was no longer just a singer or an actor. I was a filmmaker too, an editor, director. And the biggest thing is that I was making content about something I was passionate about. Can you guess what that is? Transparency within art, accessibility. I took my frustrations about my education and early career and started making content about my artistic process. A year later, I sang in another showcase in that same theater and made another video. I compared the 2 performances to one another and I saw growth. And guess what? Other people watching my videos, they could too. Not that I needed them to, but if they wanted to, they could have access to that. Not just the singing itself, but also how I felt about it, my thoughts on it, what I would change about it, my whole process, out in the open. Create your artistry. The title of this presentation, but also the slogan that I came up with at the time, I started ending my videos by saying, create your artistry. I put it on my business cards. I was trying to push a message to not just custom make your own artistic career however you want, but to experiment and to share your discoveries and process too. There is no right way to be an artist. There isn't. It's just absurd. But what really helps people just starting out is not just the accessibility, but also the ability to bounce between different reference points, between me and Chris Pratt and Daisy Ridley and the next speaker in this conference. If we're all upfront about our creative journey and our artistry, the people just getting started in their creative careers, regardless of age, they'll have that much of a better sense of where to begin, of what to do next, of how to proceed. Everybody wins. So I'm in New York making a whole bunch of content. My wife and I are making plans for our next big move. At the time, it was LA. Pandemic hits. Everything literally ground to a halt. I could hear the train stopping in the distance. I'm let go from my bartending job. Excuse me. I was let go from my bartending job. I was on unemployment, quarantined at home with my wife, afraid to walk, 4 blocks to the grocery store. It was a bad time. We decided that we needed to leave, and LA wasn't really an option anymore, so where? Well, how about home turf? We landed back in the Yup in April of 2020. She was working remotely, and for the first time in 5 years, I had nothing to do. So instead of just moping around, waiting for everything to, return to normal, I put myself to work. What better time? I started making videos again. I wrote and self-published a poetry collection because why the heck not? I started live streaming my photography editing process. I started a newsletter, a blog. I rebuilt my entire website. I created an interactive online portfolio. I opened up an online print shop. I started selling my photography as downloadable wallpapers that you could put on your phone. I did everything that I could think of to continue to push my career forwards. In the middle of all of that, we're finally back around to it. I made Artist in Isolation. And I'm based in New York City, or rather, I was. Now, I spend most of my time back where I grew up, in Michigan. I'm an artist in isolation.
Hello. It's 6 a.m. I've been up all night. I just tried recording a video, and I didn't like it. It's hard to make a video on it because there's also a lot that, that's unknown about everything. I don't know. So that's what I tried doing tonight, but it didn't work. So, I don't know, maybe I can turn this into something later, but I'm just not feeling it, so.
As an artist, moving from big city back to small town felt like defeat. I left Michigan in the first place for the opportunities that New York had to offer, as most people do. And although the whole world seems to be on hold, I still can't shake the feeling that I've somehow betrayed my goals, the dream, by leaving. Now, this video isn't so much about the current state of the world, but rather what it's been like as an artist, transitioning both body and mind from that big, busy city to slow city, and ultimately to small town, for what is looking like the foreseeable future. New York City changed for me overnight, much like it did for most people, I imagine. What I suddenly found myself with was something that I never would have expected while I was in New York, which was time. No more survival job, no classes, lessons, or any collaborative projects. Everything that I had in progress was now either canceled or on hold. All I had left to work on was my art, for me. And honestly, I wasn't prepared for it. Before we left, I hadn't done much with that time at all. I released my new book a few weeks ago. I worked on that there, some. But overall, the artistry dried up during our time staying at home. I think we can generally forgive any lapses in motivation during this time, but nonetheless, it bothers me how easily I slid. Since we've been back here in Michigan, I've been putting both New York and my art to mind. I've been finding it helpful to talk about it. So in the interest of a continued conversation, I'd like to share my thoughts. People praise New York for its unending inspirations. From the people to the art to the unexpected, the day-to-day there is wild. Being a creator there, though, it somehow requires New York City to be the backdrop for your art, to be sustained by it, if that makes sense. That pressure does exist. But I've rarely felt the drive to run from my apartment in search of that next cool idea, the next subject of my artistry. I've tried, I've been successful, and I've been happy with the process, but the more I discover about my artistry, the more I realize I don't need the big city to drive my art. In fact, I think it's fettered by it. New York City, at the end of the day, is a tool, and a tool that I'm happy to pick up should I find a way to make careful use of it. But good work isn't just about the tools that you use. The art comes from a different place completely. So a question I've been asking myself recently: does it devalue my artistry to simply be an artist living in New York City, rather than being a New York City artist? I don't know, but it's curious. New York helped me to find my artistry, I think, more quickly. But I wouldn't have been any less of an artist if I had stayed here in Michigan. So what has being here back in my home state over the last few months taught me? Well, it's given me perspective. If I'm being totally honest, part of me wonders if I may have been expecting New York to do the work for me. Being a New York City artist, it should have been enough to validate my credibility as an artist. Opportunities would have come more easily, jobs will just line themselves up, that sort of thing, but that's simply not true. And I'm learning that now more than ever. New York is kind of known for taking you in and churning you out as a better version of whatever you were when you jumped in, but you have to have the courage to enter the cage, so to speak, to get tossed around in the first place. I'm not saying I wasn't in the cage, but I think I skirted around the fight. But New York, for me, it wasn't about that fight. It was about discovery. I learned a lot about my artistry, about being an artist in New York, no doubts about that. But what I'm learning here in Michigan is that I need to be the provider, the motivation, the responsible party. My wife, Casey, and I co-host the Some of Us podcast. In it, we talk about what our lives and experiences are like finding that delicate balance between her world of accounting and my world of art. On the podcast, we've made it no secret that we do intend on moving to LA, and that's still very much the plan. The question of when, of course, now a little bit more up in the air, but we will. So, I think my approach to LA, when we do decide to make our move, needs to be the same as what a move back to New York City would be. And even, yes, although temporary, what our move back here to Michigan has become, at least for me. Over these few weeks that I've been here in the remote Midwest, I've learned a great deal more about my artistry and my attitude towards it. It's been a breath of fresh air, pun intended. Now, more than ever, I've had the freedom to explore my art full time. And what I'm finding is exactly what I thought New York City was going to give me in the first place. New York City was never in the cards for us long term. It was always meant to just be where we start. But what I'm realizing is it was all reach and no grip. And it's not that it's too hot to handle, but it can be quickly if you're not ready. And having been stripped of everything else but my art, and with the time to refresh my perspective, I'm feeling more prepared than ever. So that's the video. Thank you. Couple of things to note there. LA is definitely not on the cards right now. I forgot to mention the podcast, but there's a podcast. Obviously, I was in a bit of a different headspace when I made this, and all these photos I took up here, that was all while I was actually an artist in isolation, by the way. But in the video, I was being pretty critical about how I thought I spent my time in New York. I had a hard time getting over the fact that I bartended most of the time that I was there. And the things that I did accomplish, I sort of just brushed off as being minor achievements rather than celebrating what they were. As of yesterday, this video only had 163 views. But the views, we're circling back again, the views, the numbers, don't matter. What mattered in this case was that it was accessible. The right people saw this video. And not just the video, but also behind it. Everything I had done so far in my career in order to be able to make that video what it was. It wouldn't have been the same if I had never picked up a camera. It wouldn't have been the same if I decided to quit acting the second I dropped out of acting school. It wouldn't have been the same if I had never gone to Western. Artist in Isolation, regardless of its content, was a representation of myself and my artistry at that specific time, just like everything else I was making then too. The Boreal Collective saw this first, I think probably just using hashtags on Instagram. I posted it to my stories. They did their research, found my website and portfolio, looked through my photos and saw talent and potential. They reached out and offered me a remote content creator position. Then, the collective passed this video off to some friends at Innovate Marquette Smart Zone, and they saw it and did their research and saw my blog and my poetry book and newsletter, figured I was not just a good writer, but also a talented artist. They turned around, all in the same month, and offered me a position as lead writer for Make It Marquette. All of this is remote work. I'm not attached to any office other than the laptop that I carry around with me everywhere I go. Between these positions and all of the freelance work I do, I'm completely full-time. This scenario isn't going to be the case for like anyone else. I understand that. And I'm not trying to teach you how to do this, believe it or not. The point of me being up here today is to talk through my process, my journey, to not be a hypocrite, to talk about where I think creative industries are headed, the lessons I learned, what I'm excited about, and to be accessible. Your journey is your own. When I say create your artistry, I mean you create it, your way. Don't let anyone else define your artistry for you. All of this stuff I talked about today, it's the way I've done it, but it won't be the way you do it. I think there's serious potential with remote work and creative industries. I think casting a wide creative net is the future of modern creativity. I think it's worth giving it your all, especially when you're uncomfortable and have nothing left to lose. But that doesn't mean it's the only way. Your artistry is yours to define. Just like with Twitch and visibility and accessibility and the real stories behind some of these A-list actors, these are all just reference points for you. That's all this has ever been. I've said this already. But between me and the next artist, and the next artist, and the next, and the next, provided our process is accessible, between all of us exists your vision for how you will want to pursue your artistic career. But if you're looking for my advice, no matter which way you decide to go, chase it like your happiness depends on it. Thank you. Yeah, I'll take questions. Yes. Oh, fun. It's called Some of Us, S-U-M of Us. Season 1 is wrapped officially. We're trying to get season 2 in the pipeline, but that's out there. Yeah, there's about 50 episodes. Okay. Anything else? Oh, wow, I was so thorough then. Great. All right. Well, thank you. Oh, one more in the back, sorry. It means that I'm a photographer, I'm a filmmaker, I'm basically like an artist attached to a laptop, and I'll go around and people ask me, hey, can you take photos of this? Can you create content based on this? And I'll produce it for them and deliver it in a remote capacity. Yeah. Yes, right here. In I would say find somebody sort of at your level in that creative field that you're looking to get interested in, like whether they've, like if you're interested in woodworking as an example, and there's a woodworker that you like and he's got like a YouTube channel, I would say watch every single one of his videos and really kind of immerse yourself in that world. I think that a lot of art disciplines can be intimidating when you're looking at it from the outside, but having somebody, an entry point into that creative field, I think is very valuable. Yeah. Anything else? Awesome. Well, thank you very much to Revolve, Keith, and Shayna, and everybody involved. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your conference, and I'll be around. Thank you.